Alright, what's up guys? We have a brand new ban list. I'm extremely excited about that because finally Orcus took a hit, Sky Strikers took a hit. It's time for some new decks to come in, or classic decks to come out of the woodwork and take over, hopefully, the meta. Really shake things up. Today I'm bringing you a Necrovalley deck profile, or a Gravekeeper deck profile. Fortunately, this deck got another card back to, now it's at 3. The whole deck is unlocked because Royal Tribute is now at 3. Amazing card. It is so good in combination with some of the other cards in the deck, of course. And let's just go over it. Let's not waste any time. But we'll start off with a Gravekeeper's Commandant. This card is basically, I love this card. I wish they made more cards for field spells like this card. There's a few out there, but not many. I really like this era of cards. But basically, Gravekeeper's Commandant, you discard him and you search Necrovalley. Not once per turn, not a hard once per, not any kind of a once per turn. On top of that, he's 1600 attack, and when you have Necrovalley, he's actually 2100. So he's pretty strong. He's one of your strongest like normal deck beaters, but definitely very good. And we actually have 9 copies of Necrovalley in this deck, and I'll show you once we go through all the math, but he's one of the 3 copies. We play 3 copies of Gravekeeper Spiritualist. This is one of the newer cards. This got reprinted in the Megaton, and it just didn't even get like a rarity bump or anything. Konami just didn't care. I wish this could have been like super rare at least, or like a, super rare, ultra rare, maybe a prismatic secret rare. This card would have looked absolutely spectacular. Unfortunately, it did not get a rarity bump, but what can you do? That's life. But basically, this card is a really awesome card. It lets you summon your boss monster, which is the Spiritualist. Lets you get around having to use like polymerization or some weird thing like that. But basically, this card, during your main phase, if there's a Necrovalley on the field, you can fuse this card with a card in your hand or your side of the field in order to make a Gravekeeper monster, which is really cool. Yeah, it's pretty awesome there. It's like it's your fusion summon card. It's better than running polymerization for sure. Then we play 2 copies of Gravekeeper's Headman. When this card is summoned, you can special summon from your graveyard, and this isn't affected by Necrovalley, of course, because it's a Gravekeeper monster. You can special summon from the graveyard a Gravekeeper monster, either face up or in face down defense position. It has to be a level 4. Can't be a level 3. It has to be a level 4. So the next card I'm going to show you is actually not possible to summon, which is Gravekeeper's Recruiter. This card is a lot better than you might think. It has a really weird text effect where it says when this card is sent to the graveyard, add 1 Gravekeeper monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. It does not miss timing, which is really good. So actually when you link with it, you still get the effects to search. Because unfortunately, if it said, like, for example, right there, if it said instead of you can add, instead of add, that would have been very problematic. But this card actually does not miss timing, which is very, very beneficial. I love that. So basically, yeah, this card is like free, just like free cards from the deck. It's really like a grind game card. It's not bad to draw in your opening hand, but it's really one of those cards you want to see later, like throughout the duel, because it keeps like giving you free resources. And I wish there was a Link 1 that you could abuse with Gravekeepers, but unfortunately there's not. If he was 200 less attack, you could actually abuse him with All Mirage, but because he is 1200, unfortunately that is not possible. But yeah, he's definitely a pretty decent card, definitely a staple. At 3, then we play 2 copies of Gravekeeper's Descendant, which I actually have ultra rare somewhere, and I don't know why I didn't bring it over. But basically this card, you contribute a Gravekeeper monster, and then you can pop 1 card your opponent controls. This deck doesn't have a lot of spot removal, so when there is like an opposing floodgate, something like a anti-spell fragrance perhaps, some sort of opposing floodgate, it's a little difficult to get rid of it. So this card definitely helps, and again, it's one of those like grind game cards. You set up so many floodgates of your own, and then your opponent is like struggling to play, and when you start popping their cards, it makes it that much worse for them, honestly. But that's it. That's all of the monsters that we play. Not that many monsters because we are playing the absolutely amazing Royal Tribute. Next, we play 3 copies. Of course, you got to play 3. 3 copies of Necrovalley. basically amazing. It's like a floodgate field spell that benefits you. And like with all of the cards that you use in your deck, like they all say, like every time they do special summon from the graveyard, it says like it ignores Necrovalley anyway, which doesn't matter. So anyway, its effect. Basically, all Gravekeeper monsters gain 500 attack. Already great. Boosts everything. That's not awesome. Makes your monsters like pretty reasonable. Like a lot of the main deck monsters become about 2,000, and then spiritualists sometimes they'll be like 3,000, 3,500, like some crazy amounts. But basically, you can negate. First of all, cards can't be banished, so that hurts Orcust and a variety of decks unbelievably. It hurts Orcust insanely. Just any deck that banishes Thunder Dragons. This deck has a lot of like a really good matchup against a lot of decks as long as it doesn't go second. But we have found ways to get around that and remedy that to the greatest extent that we could, and I'll show you that throughout the deck. But basically, yeah, cards can't be banished. Second of all, negate any effect that would move a card from the graveyard to a different place, which is also important. No bringing back monsters, no looping cards back to the hand. This, again, hurts Sky Strikers. No getting cards back to the hand. No special summoning from the graveyard. Very important. And then negate any card that changes types or attributes in the graveyard. So, like, off the top of my head, Zombie World. Next, we play, so that was 6 copies, because we play 3 copies of the natural one. We play 3 copies of the Commandant, so we have 6 copies of this. And then we play 3 copies of the Necrovalley Throne. This card, basically, you can add a Gravekeeper monster from your deck to your hand, or you can, immediately after this card resolves, normal summon an additional Gravekeeper monster. Both effects are good. Just generally, you'll be using the first effect far more often. But what is awesome about this is basically another copy of Necrovalley. We now play 9 copies because you can just search this and then pitch this and summon that, and then get the Necrovalley for free. And one more thing on Necrovalley that's pretty cool. If you activate Necrovalley for the rest of that turn, like you can't get called by the grave for any reason because your opponent can't banish your cards, which is pretty stellar. But basically, yeah, Necrovalley Throne. We play 9 copies. I don't feel the need to play Terraforming because we are already playing 9 copies. And a lot of times during the duel, you get to the point where you have just so many Necrovalleys in rotation that you'll have like two in the hand and like 1 on the field and the Commandant. Like it's just like it's an unnecessary amount. Then we play 3 copies of Royal Tribute. Awesome card. Basically, if Necrovalley is on the field, both players discard all monsters from their hands, which is insane because most of the time you'll go first, and you'll summon whatever you need to summon. This deck plays a very low monster count. Your opening hands will typically have 1 to 2 monsters. You'll use up those 2 monsters either to special summon a spiritualist or something. You just summon a monster, maybe just set a monster or normal summon a monster, and then you activate this and then get rid of your opponent's, in many cases, their entire hand, which can be extraordinarily detrimental. And then you activate Necrovalley. Well, actually, Necrovalley is already active on the field, and they really have a very difficult way of getting those cards back from the graveyard. They can't banish them to activate their effects. Like, for example, Orcust, if you discard an entire Orcust hand, they can't banish their cards from the graveyard to special summon, and to special summon from graveyard, special summon from deck, and Nightmare, and Symbol Skeleton. They can't do any of that stuff because Necrovalley just doesn't allow it, so it just creates... Yeah, it just basically empties their hand for free. But yeah, definitely absolutely broken. So glad that this card is finally unlocked. This deck is at full power once again. And again, this is one of the best going first decks that you could possibly play. I mean, like there are a lot of locks in this deck that are just absolutely disgusting. Then we play 3 copies of Hidden Temples of the Necrovalley. This card is basically it's like every single barrier statue on a single continuous spell. So basically, if you control a Gravekeeper monster and Necrovalley, neither player can special summon monsters except Gravekeeper monsters. Just locks out basically it locks out your opponent from playing the game of Yu-Gi-Oh. But the end board that we usually want is like a Spiritualist a Hidden Temple, and a Necrovalley, because there's like virtually no deck can beat this, unless you're playing against possibly True Dracos, but great Supernaturalist actually has a protection effect, so it can protect Necrovalley and himself from destruction. So in that sense, True Dracos will actually have trouble outing him. But I mean, there's not a lot of decks that can get around that 3-card lock, because it's pretty disgusting. And honestly, the lock is actually pretty consistent. But next we've got one copy of Gravekeeper's Stettel, or Steel. Basically, get 2 Gravekeeper monsters from your graveyard and add them to your hand. And of course, it can't be negated by Necrovalley because it's a Gravekeeper card. Now, the only issue with this card that I found is that it's not a Necrovalley card, and it's not a Gravekeeper monster. So this is one of the very few cards that you actually cannot search off of Gravekeeper Supernaturalist, and that's extraordinarily frustrating. Because if it was searchable, I would consider maybe. I consider it a better card, but as of right now, it's a one of, because you never want to open this in your starting hand, and you certainly don't want to open more than one of this in your starting hand under any circumstances, because this is a dead card if you open it. But definitely at least a one of, though. Great card, like turn 2. It might even be good turn 1. It's just depends on the situation, because sometimes you fuse away and then you get your resources back. But there are a lot of situations where it's kind of booty. Then we play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. It's the best draw card that this deck can have. You can play a slower version with the Card of Demise and what's that card called? Pot of Duality. You can play that kind of slower version, but against summoning a Supernaturalist turn 1 or even turn 2 is something you really want to do. And it's very difficult to play when you can't special summon, unfortunately. And here's another reason I can't play it, which I'm playing 3 copies of Super Polymerization, so I definitely can't be playing Card of Demise, because Super Polymerization, I can't use it in my standby phase. I can't fuse away my opponent's board. This is one of the going second cards that I was talking about that you need, especially since a lot of the meta just has dark monsters. So you have multiple benefits with Super Polymerization. Number 1, a lot of your monsters in your deck are actually dark monsters. So that's really, really good, because you can fuse into the various like Starving Venom Dragons and stuff like that for yourself. In addition to that, you can actually fuse into the Gravekeeper Supernaturalist if you needed to, which is really beneficial. And then if you are in one of those very, very rare mirror matches with Gravekeepers, you can actually fuse into Gravekeeper Supernaturalist using your opponent's monsters. But that happening is very, very unlikely. Next, we've got our trap cards. We play 2 copies of Imperial Tomb of the Necrovalley. Again, this is a card that is searchable, and I'd play it at a higher number, but it actually is contingent on having both a Necrovalley on field and a Gravekeeper monster, which can be a little troubling. Then we play 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, because it's just a very good going first card, and you can always just side it out if anything. And then 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. This is just another going second insurance card. The reason I play Impermanence instead of Ash or Ghost Ogre, something like that, is because if I use Royal Tribute, I don't have to get rid of this, but I would have to get rid of an Ash. Like, let's say I'm going first, I would have to discard Ash. But I, of course, do not have to discard the Impermanence, because I can just set it, or I can just leave it in my hand and reveal it to my opponent. And it wouldn't matter, because it's not going to get discarded, because only monsters get discarded. So that's why I play that instead of the Ash. So we have basically a few going second cards. We have the Super Poly, which is a blowout card against a lot of matchups, against some of the more important matchups of the meta, like Thunder Dragon, Orcus, and Salamangreats. And that's about it. I don't, Sky Strikers, we still have to figure out what's going on. This deck has such a good matchup against Sky Strikers already. I don't even know if, because like if you set up a Supernaturalist and you set up Supernaturalist and Necrovalley, it's like very difficult for Sky Strikers to out that board, especially with Widow Anchor being like pointless. It's at 1. But yeah, that's it. That is the main deck. Then off to the extra deck. Play 3 copies of Supernaturalist. We are playing Pot of Desires or Pot of Extravagance, so we definitely need to have at least we have 3 of this or max out as many of these as possible. Basically, this card gains attack equal to the combined levels of all of the Gravekeeper monsters used for the fusion times 100. So sometimes you can use another Spiritualist and create a very large monster. But that effect is kind of like the secondary. Its primary effect is that when Necrovalley is on the field, this and Necrovalley cannot be destroyed, which is very good against True Dracos, like I said, because they have a hard time getting over this. And then secondly, this is a kind of a weird effect, but you can activate this effect. You have to activate it during the main phase, but you activate it during the main phase, and then during the end phase, you can search a Gravekeeper monster or a Necrovalley card. So I guess like a Necrovalley spell or trap card. So there's a huge range of cards that you can search. You can search the card that stops special summons. You can search the negate, the trap card negate, the counter trap negate. You can search this and then get another monster and get back to Necrovalley. Like there's a lot of stuff that you can basically search your entire deck with the exception of Gravekeeper's Tettle. But other than that, you can basically search everything. It's just a little weird that you get it during the end phase, and if you get it during the end phase, you can't use it. So it's a little frustrating, but it's still useful. We play 1 copy of the Diplexer Chimera. It's it's a super poly target for Salamangreats and Marinsis. It doesn't matter that you play it at 1 because you're going to activate it in the standby phase anyway, the super poly, so it's not going to get banished. You don't got to worry about that. 1 Mud Dragon. 3 copies of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. This is one of the more important ones you got to keep for the grind game because there are a lot of dark decks. And like I said, you can use it yourself. 1 copy of Predaplant Dracospelia. 1 copy of Predaplant, can't pronounce his name. 3 copies of Wee Witch Apprentice because the majority of your deck is actually dark with the exception of Commandant. The rest of them are basically dark. And then 2 copies of You Choose, Borreload or Boral Sword, just in case you need to go for game. Although, to be honest with you, most of the time, you'll be fine with what you have. Borreload is probably like 5% better than Boral Sword, only because he steals a monster, and that can help you get over just large, troublesome monsters, whereas Boral Sword, might create some issues there. But that's it. That is the deck profile. Let me know what you think. I might put up a slow version of the deck, like a very slow version with Card of Demise. Maybe call it like a budget version. But yeah, I think this is the better version to play overall. But thank you for watching and subscribe.